Farm for Profit Podcast. Take a listen, have a blast. Farm for Profit Podcast. Learn about farming while having a laugh. Farm for Profit Podcast.
And listeners, welcome back to the Farm for Profit Podcast. You got Tanner and Dave sitting here today, here to bring you a really cool livestock-based conversation.
They've been asking for more livestock, Tanner, for a long time.
Every one of those episodes does extremely well. It's maybe we should start Farm for Profit -livestock and just do one of those shows every week.
We'd have like Farm for Profit / just like Google Docs, Google Earth, Google this,
Sheets.
just
Yeah.
Farm for Profit this, that.
This.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But can't forget, today's episode is brought to you by Pattern Ag, predicting pest and pathogen risk in your fields. Don't gamble with your yields. Go to www.pattern.ag today.
And listeners, remember, we have a goal and we need your help. It's 2 million downloads. So it took us 3 years to get to 1 million downloads, Tanner. But by the end of the year, by golly, we need you to like, share, rate, review. But more than anything, share and have somebody else download it. If we can double our listenership, we can meet that goal. And so we need your help.
That's right. And this is going to be a fun conversation. We appreciate you continuing to let us know who we should talk to. We appreciate if you work for a company reaching out to us and letting us know that your company would be interested in sharing some of the latest trends, tips, and techniques in the ag industry. But Dave, let's jump into introducing our two guests today. We've got some great expertise here. Starting off with Tony. Tony is the Vice President of Risk Management at StockGuard. He uses his unique experiences in both risk management as a consultant and a producer to combine a great user experience. He's fourth generation cow, calf, and row crop operation. He uses that to work together. He's also a former ag banker, so a soft spot in my heart as far as that goes. Second guest is Jordan. Jordan's senior risk management consultant for StockGuard. He's a first-generation farmer, so some fresh perspective there, and owner of a feedlot and cow-calf operation in southeast Iowa. As that risk management consultant, he's dedicated to sharing his knowledge, which he's going to do today, of market trends and risk management solutions. So, gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. How you doing, Jordan?
Well, I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Very good.
We are great. And Tony, how's things in your world?
Yeah, good. A little warm today, though. It's the heat's coming on, but getting a little bit of rain, so we're happy.
Good. So, Tony, I gave high-level introduction. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit more about who you are, and then, Jordan, you do the same.
Sure. Yeah, so like you said, fourth generation cattle farmer, row crop operator here in southeast Iowa, and actually my profession coming out of college, which got a degree from Iowa State, went right into banking, and so did that for about 15 years, and then started my own risk management company, helping producers with financial management and marketing help, that sort of thing, or whatever they needed. If they just needed a conversation on the farm, they knew they could pick up the phone and call me. And so that's been my role for about the last 13, 14 years, and then as well as the crop insurance and livestock insurance space.
Awesome. And Jordan?
Yeah, kind of like the intro says, first generation farmer, grew up in town, where I helped my uncle on a little dinky 15-acre farm up in Muscatine, Iowa, and went to Iowa State, came back from there and worked for a couple row crop operations. And I knew there was something more, so I went off. I built a pig barn, and then built another barn, and then jumped into the cattle space, and I've been there ever since. And I started my first monoslope barn like right before COVID started, and I was cow-calf before that, and so I've kind of been through the highs and lows of the cattle in the last 5 years. So it's been a rough go, but we're still going. And that's what kind of brought me to StockGuard was I've been through the misery. So that's all the importance.
So are we talking like crop insurance for cattle?
I don't know. We got to figure it out.
What? So now I need a high level. We learned about Tony and Jordan. Tony, tell me, how does this work? And give me a 30,000-foot overview.
Sure. So, for years, cattle farmers and ranchers didn't really have any price protection tools to use besides what was available on the Board of Trade. And there are a lot of producers that weren't comfortable with doing that. And, back in the early 2000s, they developed a couple products for livestock producers, one in LRP, the other one LGM, that help producers secure revenue, and as well as like the LGM side, secure and be able to lock in a crush margin on fat cattle or on swine. And so two pretty simple tools for producers to use, and they don't need a broker to do it. They can do it right through their crop insurance agent.
So then where does StockGuard come into this?
Yeah, so StockGuard actually is a company that has developed software on the other side to kind of make the process a little simpler. So for our producers, we've developed that software where they can pull it up on their mobile device, and they can get quotes on a daily basis, whatever's available through the RMA, through the USDA that day, and be able to actually hit the order button and put it in an order without ever talking to somebody. And so StockGuard has kind of been a company that has stepped into the space on the technology side to help ease the access for producers, as well as making it a little bit easier for agents as well.
So Jordan, Tony started off with a couple of acronyms. Let's spell those out and explain what they are. So let's go with LRP first.
So LRP is livestock risk protection. And it's like you guys were saying, it's kind of like crop insurance, right? But the difference with it is we can go up to like 99% coverage. So we can go based on futures prices today. We can basically make a hedge, put a price floor in for calves of any weight and any amount. So when you buy these positions on the board standardly, you have to buy a contract, right? Well, with this, you can narrow it down to, any head number and any weight number, and put that price floor in, just like buying a put, but you're really narrowing it down.
Wow. So then what's the difference between that and LGM? What's LGM?
So LGM is the livestock gross. Actually, Tony, you do this one. You know that way better than I do.
Yeah, so LGM is the livestock gross margin, and livestock gross margin we use on the live cattle side. So those are going to be on finished cattle. And what that does is it basically guarantees you the revenue minus the cost of the feeder calf, minus the cost of corn. And so if you pick, for instance, there's two different types, calf and yearling finishing. If you pick calf finishing, you're starting a 550-pound calf, and it's assuming that you're finishing it at 1150, but you're going to use 52 bushel of corn to finish that calf. So you're basically taking the revenue from your live cattle, subtracting off the cost, and you're left with a margin, and you're able to actually insure that margin. So if any one of those three components goes against you, the markets move against you, it could create a situation where you would have an indemnity coming back to you on that calf. So it's a little bit more of a pure product, and it was developed in that way because we track crush margin every week. Iowa State University does, and hey, we need to figure out a way to ensure that value. And so they created that as well back in the early 2000s.
So what is crush margin? I don't know what that is.
Yeah, so the crush margin is basically the revenue from that finished calf minus the cost of corn and minus the cost of that original feeder calf.
Okay.
And you're left with that margin. That's crush margin.
Does this sound a lot like the crop insurance products that you have available?
No.
No? You don't get to sell it. You don't get to take the revenue from your crop, subtract off your fertilizer and your seed cost?
No, unfortunately, most of the products don't take into the inputs. Mm-hmm. Some private ones do, might.
That's really interesting. So go ahead.
Is the revenue from your LGM or LRP, is that ever, so if you're selling to a stockyard, a packer after kill, and you're selling to JBS or Packerland or somebody, American Foods, if you're doing that and you know that your margin is lower than what you would get with these, do these just default and pay out, or how do you determine what triggers a pay?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So basically, when they calculate the crush margin, all of those three components all have they're all tradable commodities on the board of trade, right? And so we have this for value, and that's what we use is the board of trade to derive that crush margin. And so we'll start that contract with an expected crush margin for, let's say, December. And when we get to December, we get to the end of that live cattle contract on the board. We'll go back and we'll recalculate those values where they ended on the board. And so it doesn't matter what you got for your cattle. It doesn't matter what you paid for corn or even what you paid for that feeder calf in the cash. We're basically trying to capture what did the futures market do, because we know the futures market will also kind of translate to the cash, and that's the best way we could figure it. Otherwise, if you're using cash prices, sometimes you could get some really wonky values. And so they use the futures as kind of a baseline for that calculation in the beginning and in the end. And then if there's a difference, if that crush margin's lower than what you insured in the beginning, then we'll pay you the difference.
So do I have to have the cattle?
You do. So it is required that you have the cattle. That's a nice thing, because they're not going to let people outside of the cattle industry play that game, because you could get in there and play those spreads, obviously. With the subsidies that they're charging for the premium, the premiums are actually at a pretty big discount to what you could go to the Board of Trade for a similar type product. And so we need to make sure that they're just producers. And what they do is, if there is an indemnity, they'll make you prove receipts. So they want to see those kill sheets.
So some of the verbiage I heard in there, when you asked if it sounded like any of the products that I use on the crop side, it actually does a little bit from a new product I heard the last couple of years called margin protection on corn, where it kind of takes a year to pay out. How does this pay out? Does it pay out after the cattle goes to the market? Does it take a little while, or when does that happen?
Yeah. So basically, and that's the other nice thing, is it will pay out. Let's say we have a December contract on cattle. They all go in December. You won't get billed for the premium until January 1st. And so that's the other nice thing about this contract. But as soon as those cattle go and that actual gross margin is calculated, we will know right away to be an indemnity or not, and to start the paperwork, the loss paperwork. And usually you can be paid within a couple weeks. So it's pretty much right away.
So that's not something you have to have on your operating line. That's
Right.
kind of nice.
Right. But I want to go back to do I have to have the cattle? Because what happens if my cattle gain at a faster rate for a December contract and we shipped in November? Or what if I haven't sold them yet in December? How's that play out?
Sure. Yeah, it's pretty flexible, especially on the LGM side, because you can market those cattle anytime within that marketing year, right? So if that marketing year and that contract starts today, I've got an 11-month window to pull cattle out of to fill that contract, to prove those receipts. So they don't even necessarily have to be those exact cattle. And let's say we're moving cattle all year long. Proving those receipts is pretty simple. If you would contract 100% of your cattle through LGM, you need to prove 75% of those receipts, right? So basically, if you contract 100, you're going to need to show me receipts for at least 75. And if you can't, if you say, okay, hey, I lost 30 of them, then and you show me 70, then your indemnity will be reduced down to that 70 instead of the full 100. But typically that's not going to be the case.
So is this only for feeder cattle style? When I think of StockGuard, you talked about cow-calf operations. So my family's in a cow-calf operation and more breeding stock. And is there any advantage for those guys, or is it just really feeders?
Jordan, I'm going to let you go.
Yeah, that's where the LRP really comes into play. Like I was saying, we can do any weight and narrow it down to any amount of head. So if you guys are cow-calf and you guys sell 450-pound calves every year, well, we can put a position on 450-pound calves clear out till next April right now, or maybe even next May. So we can truly cover what it is that you're selling. Those positions on the board, usually you're overprotected because you got to buy that full contract, or you're underprotected because you have a few more cattle than what the contract would fall short. So that's where the LRP really comes in handy for the cow-calf guys.
So are you able to buy LRP for a newborn calf if you have a unique operation where you're going to take it from calf to finish?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So that if you're going to take a calf from beginning to end, you're going to finish those calves on your farm, then you can use then either product. You can use the LGM or the LRP. And so because LRP, you can actually insure up to a 1,600 pound calf. They've changed those weights here in the last couple years. And so if, we have a lot of people that insure those fat cattle through LRP. And then if they want to go ahead and cover some of the costs too, right, those two cost components, we'll use the LGM product. But LGM cannot be used on feeder cattle.
Another thing with the LRP is some guys they'll cover themselves 3 times, right? They'll protect themselves as a 5 weight. They'll protect themselves from 5 to 750, and they'll protect themselves from 750 to 1,500. There's a little bit of play with it. You can cover yourself 3 different times.
So why do that?
Okay, so if I'm cow-calf, you might be nervous that the market would drop if you were going to market those animals at 500 pounds, right? So you could protect yourself at 5. Well, say you wanted to retain ownership, say, hey, it looks profitable to carry these into be yearlings. Well, I'm going to hedge myself at 750 too, and I'm going to background them for a little bit. And then say like, hey, there's some real potential. If I finish them, let's put a floor on to finish them. You can put a floor on as you finish them as well.
Is there a certain number of head? You guys have done this for a while now. Like, how big do I got to be to make the juice worth the squeeze on this? Are we talking, 100 plus head? Otherwise, it's probably not worth hedging against doing something. I mean, to make it worthwhile.
I have customers. I have a customer with 3 head LRP.
3. He said 3 head.
Huh.
Yep, 3. Yep.
You're good, Dave.
All right.
We can get you covered.
Show cattle. There we go.
Oh, yeah. Do you have a show cattle market? Yeah.
Well, they cost more. I don't know how you insure them. They're $50,000 a head anymore. Jeez Louise.
Right. It might not make a lot of sense for show cattle.
I have to put that under like
we have a few of those
homeowners.
too.
Homeowners, yeah. Like a wedding ring.
Yeah.
Okay, so you hinted early on when we asked where StockGuard came into this. Let's talk a little bit more about how this app makes it functionable, how that kind of takes some of the ease or puts ease into this process.
Go ahead, Jordan. I'll let you go.
Well, a couple different reasons, a couple different cool things. So like from a producer standpoint, I have a feedlot, right? And so I'm sitting watching the markets go up and down every day. And I'm like, I always wonder, because LRP it's like that 99% coverage, right? So it's like, where's that land? So at any time after 4:30, I can look on my phone and see where rates are today. Another thing, when you're at the sale barn, when you're sitting there and you're trying to buy some calves and you're wondering like, hey, I wonder where I can hedge these. It's real time in your hands. And then also you don't have to make that annoying phone call to your broker or your insurance guy and say, hey, what's the price of a put cost today in the money? It's all right there.
So is there a difference between there's got to be a difference, and maybe I'm just looking at it wrong, between the insurance that you guys offer and then Livestock Marketing Association offers an insurance program as well, and it covers for death. Yours isn't necessarily covering death. Yours is just covering the margin.
Yeah. Ours like LRP is just covering the revenue, and so it will not cover death. Now, if we had an insured that lost cattle and they reported them to us, they have to be reported within 72 hours. We'll go ahead and pay if there is a market loss on that animal. So if on a feeder calf, I had 236, 100 weight insured on a 7 weight calf, if that calf would happen to die and that price would go to 220, then we'll pay still $16 100 on that calf, as long as it's reported correctly. So, but we're not going to pay the whole value of that calf. That's that different kind of insurance that's more on the property casualty side.
Gotcha.
On death loss.
So as you guys work with a lot of your clients, how are the most successful ones using these products? Are they using them in combination? Is there one that favors the other? Why don't you start with that, Jordan?
I have all shapes and sizes working with it. So I got cow-calf guys that finish their cattle, and so they'll make the bet, and they'll say, hey, in November, when this thing's 750 pounds, I almost bet that they won't be worth that. And they're going to be buying some anyway. So they'll just kind of use it as like a little hedging tool there. And then it just offers something to those cow-calf guys that aren't familiar with the board, that grandpa lost his 80 hedging. They don't want to deal with it. And so that's kind of what I work with. I don't know what we call them. What do we call those guys, Tony? What type of clients? Not key clients, but.
Well, we kind of refer to, I mean, those are your typical, we call them the retail clients, but they're your typical farmer rancher. Anything, I'm going to say anything under 10,000 head would fit into that category, and probably a little bit more self-guided. And then, but if you look at what we call kind of the larger feedlot clients, they're probably using the LGM product a little bit more because it kind of helps them control and maybe hedge out their corn, their feed costs a little bit. And then also feeder cattle, like, if we think feeder cattle are going to still run on us a little bit, they can also buy that product like 12 months out, 11 months out actually, and kind of control, maybe put a cap on that feeder calf price, on those calves they haven't even bought yet. So LGM is used that way on those bigger feedlots, but I would say we see them also using the LRP. The only problem with the LRP is it does have head limits, 25,000 head per reinsurance year. And so the reinsurance year starts on July 1st and runs to June 30th every year. That's what we call a crop insurance year. And I know it's kind of weird. It's in the middle, but that's the way it runs. And so 25,000 head on the cattle guy for LRP. And then LGM is actually unlimited. So we find ourselves working with some of the larger feedlots across the nation.
So as egg lenders, would this help your balance sheet? I mean, I know you're figuring crop insurance into something. So now if we're a cattle operation, or if we have a listener who's a cattle operation and they're not hedging against margins, would this help your position on a balance sheet to go borrow to build another monoslope, to build another something, because you basically know you're trying to protect against?
Absolutely, it'd be a factor. I mean, not necessarily affecting the balance sheet itself, but looking at the risk of the scope of that request. So if you're coming and you want to bump up to the upper limits of loan to value, you want to get to the lower limits of cash flow, having something like this available to protect your margin or protect your revenue is going to be a positive factor on a loan decision. Yeah. So guys, as you have been talking a lot about these products so far, that's how we're helping those pasture guys, those rangeland guys. When we think crop insurance is on row crops, right? It's on cash crops. We're not necessarily helping the pasture guys out. This is a way using LRP to kind of manage the margins for those rangeland folk.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, it's just, especially right now where feeder calf prices are so high, especially the cow calf guy, he's sitting there going, man, I've got 6 months to market. And, that's a lot of time for the market to either drop out from underneath us or, have some major volatility depending on what's going on in the world market, economy, and things like that. And so it's a way for them to grab that price right now and lock it in and not have to worry about it. Say, hey, I can lock in 235, 100 weight on my calves that I'm going to sell this winter. Man, that's a heck of an opportunity. And we normally don't have that opportunity to do that. And you can do that for, a pretty reasonable premium, And really what I always say is you're really what you're doing is you're laying that risk off to somebody else. Somebody's on the other side, and on the other side are the crop insurance companies. They're the ones taking the bet, and then how they manage their risk is their own thing. But producers can lay that risk off, just like we do with crop insurance, to those crop insurance companies on the livestock side, and it's a heck of an opportunity. And now the government has increased the subsidies on LRP and LGM both to go up to 50%. So they're paying almost like crop insurance. They're paying a lot of the bill. And it's kind of a no-brainer for producers. What we're trying to do is we're trying to create habits. And they're good habits. And being a former banker, I think they're habits that I've always looked at as being kind of a no-brainer because you're locking in prices, and no matter what's going on, unless prices are really low, and maybe it's not a very good idea, to lock in when they're really low. But when prices are where they're at, we know expenses have gone up on the farm and on the ranch. It's time to lock in some of that profit, and we have the opportunity to do that. Otherwise, if we don't do that, there's another thing we say is we're speculating in the cash. No matter how you look at it, with market price, you're speculating one form or another. And so if you're leaving it to the spot market, then you're speculating in the cash. We have a product here, and it's an option. It keeps your top side open. So if this price goes up, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're just going to have to pay the premium at the end. Otherwise, the top side's wide open. You can participate in those higher markets if they happen, which a lot of times is the reason people don't want it. It keeps them from doing that is because they say, hey, I think prices are going to go higher. Well, how about we create a safety net, let prices go higher if that's what they're going to do. But if for some reason somebody pulls the rug out from underneath this market, you're covered.
Wow. What are you thinking back there?
That sounds nice. So then it's kind of like a put, right? But you don't have probably any margin calls, or you're not playing the board and all that kind of stuff, right?
Correct. Yeah, and there's no upfront cost.
You're not writing that check up front, and don't necessarily have to call your broker and send them a check right away. As well as the neat thing about LRP, here's the thing we haven't talked about, is LRP guarantees you based on futures. But that LRP, sometimes it can go against you, but that LRP settles back on the feeder cattle to the feeder cattle index. So it's going to capture any cash loss. So you're going to guaranteed futures, and it's going to settle to an actual cash value, and that's figured on a weekly basis. Everybody knows what the feeder cattle index is. It's an average over like a 12-state area. Okay, so but on fed cattle, it's the 5-area average. So it's going to settle back, and I think it's 80% choice. Jordan, now they just switched that, so it's it's a good cattle. It mirrors really well with what's going on in the countryside with these cattle, and so it's kind of nice. The only time that doesn't work is when cash price is really, really strong, but you can't outguess that. I would say on the feeder calf side is we're locking in futures, and in Iowa, and I want to say in the Midwest, we have a really good feeder calf market because there's some of the best calves in the world, right? We raise some of the best livestock in the world. And so we get a premium for our livestock, and there are other parts of the country that maybe they don't get as much for their feeder cattle. So you could actually lock in a futures price and get what you want in the cash locally, and still actually collect on LRP because cattle in the rest of the country maybe aren't bringing as much money.
Interesting.
And so it can't create an indemnity when you didn't really think you had one coming. We've had that happen multiple times, and it's just the way the product works.
So even though you need receipts, the receipts don't affect how it pays out.
No. The receipts don't affect that at all. You just have to prove numbers. And then also they're looking at the weights. So we have a couple different weight categories, under 600 pounds and over 600 pounds to 1,000, and then over 1,000 to 1,600. You just need to make sure that you're in the right weight category, which is usually not difficult to do.
All right, Corey, here's the payoff question. Jordan, what does this cost?
It varies, and that's the nice part. We have different coverage levels. You can buy as much in the money as you want, 99.5%, all the way down sometimes to 88 or 89%. Usually, typically, like 8-weight cattle, you can be anywhere from $15 to, at $10 out of the money, $10 a hundredweight out of the money, all the way up to maybe $50 or $60 for 100% in the money, which could still be a 30% or 40% discount compared to buying this position on the board.
Wow.
Sounds cheap.
It sounds reasonable.
Yeah. Is there any? So this is just for cattle. You don't do anything with hogs or chickens or anything like that.
No chickens.
He didn't say no hogs.
Chickens, but we do cover hogs as well, and a lot of LRP is used on hogs. And over the years, I've covered a lot of swine with LGM. It's just a great product. And on the swine side, using LGM, it covers the lean hog price minus the cost of corn minus the cost of soy meal. So there's no purchase price of a SEW pig or a feeder pig, but it covers the two probably main feed components minus that lean hog price.
Interesting.
Well, yeah, it is interesting because you could have been points like here in the last 6 months to where maybe that cost of that feeder pig was negative because they were just trying to give them away.
Yeah.
Certainly interesting for us to see things there. Boys, what else are we missing? What else should our listeners know about how to put products like this to work?
Jordan?
Go for it, Tony. Go for it.
Okay,
I know you got something. I'll bounce off you.
Well, I mean, I think we just need to create some habits here in the livestock industry. We now have these tools that are very, very simple to use, and utilizing them like we do crop insurance. On the crop insurance side, I think the use rate on crop insurance on all acres in the United States is like 95%. And so we've gotten into the habit of using crop insurance to cover those acres. Obviously, there's a lot of dollars at stake. And now we're seeing that on the livestock side, right? I mean, we're sitting there. We got guys that are buying 700-pound calves for $1,700, $1,800 a head. That's what we were getting for fat cattle just a couple years ago, and probably more. And so now, as bankers, we have a ton of dollars at risk as well as producers. And I think it's forcing our hand a little bit to making sure our backsides are covered. And we have the tools to do it. Now, the USDA has come out. They've been on like a 4 or 5 year deal here where they're really trying to improve these products so producers are using them. They really want producers to use these. So they've upped the subsidies. They've given us more options on coverage levels. They've done a lot of things to make the products better. And I think they're going to continue to do that in the next few years. And so we're hoping that eventually those participation rates will go up and almost mirror what crop insurance does today. And so that's where StockGuard also comes in is we're like one of the only companies out there that provides tools right at your fingertips where after talking to us initially, you really don't have to talk to us again if you don't want to. You can actually put an order in right through our portal and also track your coverages. Where am I at? How many head do I have covered for December? How many do I have covered for September? Where am I at on my own operation? And as time goes on here, we're also creating some other tools that's going to help those feedlots and those operations even more, help them manage those situations, their risk management on the farm. What do you think, Jordan, as a producer?
As a producer, well, as a first generation producer, there's not much tolerance. We were just talking about balance sheets, and when you're sitting at that, if you're sitting at that 75% loan to value and your cash flow is tight, you got to do something, and not having any margin outlay up front is just key for these young guys, I think.
I like it. What were we going to ask? So as we get ready to wrap up, first, let's start here with contact information. If people want to connect with you guys and learn more about StockGuard, but then get some resources beyond this episode, how best do they search you guys out?
Yeah, you can go out there and search out our website, www.stockguard.io, and you can put in a request there. Obviously, you can contact Jordan and I directly. I'm by email, tony@stockguard.io, and same way, Jordan at stockguard.io. But, by phone, you can also contact us that way. Our numbers are all on the website, so you don't have to write them down going down the road if you're listening. Just jump on there, and you can get our contact information, and you can also learn a little bit more about what we're talking about on there. We have some videos, some training videos and things on how the products work. And you can even go on there and apply and you can, if you apply today, you can get coverage today, as long as it's after 4.
Wow. That's great. Well, gentlemen, we ask our guests the same question each time. So before I summarize, I'll give you that question, and then we'll stick Corey on a challenge for this episode.
Okay.
The question is, if you each could go back and stand next to yourself at age 18, what would you go back and say? So be thinking about that. But we had both Tony and Jordan here from StockGuard to give us an idea as to what risk management practices and programs and products were available for our livestock producers. We've had such great demand for livestock episodes. This was perfect timing. We talked about livestock risk protection, that's LRP. We also talked about livestock gross margin, LGM. So when we look at livestock risk protection, you could have potentially up to 99% coverage. It's a hedge-like product and based on futures prices. Livestock gross margin manages that margin. So we take the total revenue projected from that animal, less the feeder calf cost, less 52 bushels of corn, and we come up with a crush margin. We then monitor that crush margin, and that's how indemnities get paid. We see successful farmers and ranchers using both products, and anybody can use it of any size. LRP they've got a product or a customer out there with 3 calves, so even Dave could participate there with his growing herd himself. They also have these products available outside of cattle into hogs, so it's fun to see our livestock producers get options to minimize their risk. We also know that, Corey, you have to own the livestock. Mm-hmm. So you can't get into this product if you're custom feeding hogs or if you don't have any cattle, because you will have to produce receipts on the end of this. But they can be tools here to, 1, manage your margin, 2, maybe control your feeder calf price if you're looking to buy. The government does subsidize the price as far as the product goes itself, and you can get in at a lot of different levels. If you don't have a product like this, you're technically speculating in the cash, as we discussed that. This has been fun, and if you want a portal or an app that allows you to do this without having to talk to the guys once your account is set up, StockGuard could be that resource for you. So as we sit here and go into that payoff question, Jordan, you get to go first. What would you go back and tell yourself at age 18?
Work harder. And I was thinking about this the other day, actually. I wish I could go back and tell myself, you don't realize how fast time really goes. That age from 18 to 30, it's like snap of a fingers, man. So enjoy it, work hard, play hard. And
Tony?
Well, that's a good question. I think, kind of the same. Thinking back to when I was 18, just entering college, it was a little bit of a stressful time going from a small school in southeast Iowa to something like that. I wish I hadn't stressed so much and maybe enjoyed that time a little bit more until you kind of got that time, got more comfortable with what you were doing there. I think I stressed a little bit too much, but I'd say for younger people, just don't stress too much. Life's too short. Like I said, life goes, it's like a blink of an eye. It seems like now I'm almost 50 years old and wonder where all the time went and wish I had all those stressful moments back. Where I worry about things I shouldn't worry about.
Good answers, gentlemen. Corey, what do you got for a challenge?
It goes along the lines of stress. Some of the most stressful people I know are livestock people that own livestock. I mean, just from growing up in my life, I've seen a lot of good cattle guys go bald when they're 25 years old, type of stuff. And it's about life, like managing risk. We're playing, I think Tony said, feeder cattle are double what they were a couple years ago, or buying feeder cattle or what you would have got for a fat calf a couple years ago. I mean, we're playing with so many more dollars than we ever have before. Manage your risk and in all facets of life.
I like it. That's a good challenge. Well, Tony, Jordan, this has been a pleasure. We appreciate you hanging out with us. I know we'll have our listeners reaching out your direction. So thanks again for starting the chain of resources, and I know you'll be valuable to them even down the road.
Thank you guys for giving us this opportunity. It's been a great conversation.
Awesome. And listeners?
Thanks, guys.
And listeners, until next time, have a good one.